thank you all again for being here. I'm Rebecca Cullen. I own Cullen Company at Keller Williams. And we also have a property management arm to our business. We have an acquisition arm to our business. And we serve a lot of investors in our organization. We actually had a double investor closing today, and we should have their flip projects back on the market within the next 3 months. So definitely walk the walk, like Jeff Brunel said. And some of our teammates are on here. Thank you for being here. And so I launched Grid in May of 2022 because I saw a need for education. We have a lot of investor networking groups in Charlotte. There's a lot of them, and it's kind of hard to navigate which ones are the best and which ones are valuable. And so what I found is nobody was actually teaching how to become an investor or meet people where they needed to be. And oftentimes I would make new relationships, but I felt like I was teaching them and I wasn't really getting much out of the conversation. And so I realized, let's start from the beginning, start from the life cycle of a transaction or of an investment transaction. And, here we are, where to find the money. So just know I have slides here. Normally we don't do slides, but because you're visual, or a lot of you probably are visual, we're going to go through these slides. And if you have questions, just unmute yourself and speak. Because I can't necessarily see you from the screen. So it sounds like, Brian, you are not muted, and I'm going to mute you. Okay. But if you guys want to chat, just unmute yourself and ask as many questions as you would like. And we already did member intros. For those who are new to the group, I'm so glad to see you. We typically don't go virtual. We typically meet in person because I feel like there's a lot of value with the networking. But, of course, in the case of weather and the storm, we were able to switch gears because we have it set up to do so. So we have had some folks upset that we no longer go virtual as an option, but hopefully we start seeing them back in person, because I find value in making sure that they get the connections that they need. So I'm going to share this with you. So this is the disclaimer. I'm not an attorney. I'm not a CPA. I am just a real estate professional and a real life investor. And so what we share in this group setting and via video is most often opinion or examples of transactions that I've been part of or that we've experienced. So please do your own research and tread lightly. And if you want to consult with an actual attorney or CPA, please do so for your own situation. Okay, now we're gonna get started. So you found the deal. So Lou, you found a deal and you flipped it, and now it's on the market, right? So there's a whole bunch of steps before that. And oftentimes people, whether it's a brand new investor or somebody who's super savvy, they tend to do this backwards. And maybe you guys have experienced it this way, but oftentimes people go to a lender or they find somebody who has a whole bunch of money, and then now they have to go find a deal. I love to find the deal first and the money comes. I promise you, if you think that way, you will find the money. You have people like me, you have people who deploy money every single day, or access to people who have money. If you find a deal, you will figure out how to buy it. I promise. How does that make people feel? Does that make you all feel a little certain way? Some of you are smiling. Cool. So once you've found that deal, most of the time, if you're in real estate, or if you have bought multiple properties, or you've worked in the contracting business for any time, most of the time you can kind of gauge how much a renovation is going to cost. Most of the time. Like when I walk in a house and I'm talking to a potential seller, I can pretty much gauge based off of the square footage of the house how much carpet is going to be and how much paint is going to be. A new dishwasher is going to cost me about $400. A new refrigerator could potentially cost me $1,200 to $1,700. Depends on, how upscale we want to get. I also know that I could go to the scratch and dent place and get something real cheap. And in a lot of our rentals, that's what we keep. That's what we have. But in a lot of our flips, we go with higher end quality materials. So just kind of start educating yourself around those like really quick numbers, and it'll really help you. I actually love a tool. I told Heather about this, I think, the other day. I use an app called Ballpark Deal. So oftentimes Heather's going to be like, hey, Rebecca, off the top of your head, how much do you think this could rent for or be renovated for or resell for? And, my secret is I use this app a lot.
Shame on you. All these years.
Yeah. All these years. But I mean, it's called Ballpark Deal, and it's an app, and I love it.
Okay.
Other tools similarly that are my secret go-tos are AirDNA, AIRDNA. I think it's actually not .com. It's like .de or something. I'm going to tell you this in a second. It is an excellent resource.
Hey, Rebecca, is that app, the Ballpark, is it a rental calculator?
It is. It does a few things, actually.
Does it look like a little house with the calculator?
Yes.
Okay,
Yep.
Thanks.
Yes, you're welcome. You can figure out cash on cash. You can typically figure out the cash flow. If you have the cap rate, which we talk about cap rate all the time in these classes. Hey, real estate agents, what is cap rate? We have to take tests on that.
You just did this.
It's essentially the return on investment for the money that's into the property.
Yeah, so it's purchase price divided by investment. And so typically, so my stance on cap rate is if your cap rate beats your interest rate. So if you're financing this property, if your cap rate is over your interest rate, you are going to win every day, all day, forever. You're going to always cash flow. But what we're finding with the high interest rate market that we're in, and especially if we're getting hard money, there has to be a way for us to either lower our expenses or raise our price or rent or whatever you're evaluating. And if the deal does not make sense, just don't do it. But back to, so ballpark deal and AirDNA. So AirDNA is airdna.co. So that is absolutely one of my secret go-tos to figure out what the occupancy rate would be for short-term rentals. So if I'm exploring potentially buying something at the beach, for example, I'm going to put in the zip code for that area. There's a free version and there's a paid version. I usually do the free version. Put in the zip code, and it'll tell me a gauge of what the annual rate of occupancy is going to be. And so yesterday, actually, Heather, I'm going to use you again. Yesterday, Heather's like, what do you think this could short-term rent for? And I just popped on AirDNA and I'm like, it's 54% occupancy. Like I wouldn't even touch that for short-term rental because half of the year it's going to sit vacant. And it's truly just because of the location. It's not because of the zip code. It's just because of that particular house. And it would be a great primary. It would be an excellent primary residence, and the appreciation is going to just keep going up and up and up. But for the short-term rental, it just doesn't make sense. So I kind of got in the weeds on that, but it goes back to what are the tools that you can grab from apps or technology or software that help you figure out what the renovation or what the ARV, which is after repair value, is going to be once you find this deal. So, possible sources to fund your deal. Cash, of course, is the easiest and the cheapest. But even if you have 100% of the cash, does it make sense to tie it up? I don't believe so. I like good leverage. Robert Kiyosaki talks about great leverage, which includes debt. Now, if you're a Dave Ramsey fan, you're the opposite, where debt is bad. And I think there's good leverage. And of course, if you're a Dave fan, then you're a Dave fan. I truly love getting a loan, even if I have to pay cash for the reno. Okay, so there's like a couple of options here. Now, if you have a home equity line of credit, or if you have some other ways that you're pulling technically debt, I would just look at what has the higher interest rate. So for example, if you are talking to a hard money lender, yet you know you have $175,000 sitting in a home equity line of credit, and the hard money is going to be 11.9% interest, but they'll fund you 3 months up front for your construction. That's a great deal. However, if my HELOC is only 9.5% or 8.5%, which is what they're going, or what their interest rates are at about, I'm probably just going to pull from the HELOC over here for my down payment and my construction because it's just cheaper. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Cool. So that's one option. Again, home equity, stocks, other investments, they're good options, but it may require you to liquidate other investments. Like my primary residence, for example. If I was planning on selling my primary residence in the next 2 years, I'm probably not going to pull equity from that property. And right now there's not a lot of, and if any of you guys know anybody who's doing this, but there's not a lot of people pulling HELOCs on investment properties because we're not winning in the market anymore. The market has kind of changed where houses are sitting on the market a little bit longer. There's no guarantee that if like Lou, like you probably could have sold your flip in days in 2021. And I don't know anything about this property, so I'm just using it as an example. But you know, it may be a little bit of a shock if something sits on the market for more than a few weeks.
Agree. Yes, I completely agree. Our realtor told us right now is a tough time. Houses are typically about 60 days on the market. But yeah, I agree. Right now it's just sitting for a little bit. So we'll try to make the plans to see what we're gonna do on the next steps.
Yeah. Well, and again, timing is everything. And I mean, everything will sell. There's always going to be the right price. There's going to be the right condition, and there's always going to be a ready, willing, able buyer eventually. And so if we're pulling from home equity or stocks or your IRA or your 401k for these opportunities, you know, it may not be the right option for you, and you just need to explore what that looks like. So the IRA, I love pulling from my IRA. I love borrowing from myself. It's like my number one choice when it comes to making investment purchases. And I have an amazing financial advisor team who I can connect anybody to if they want that resource. But the best part about it is I'm literally taking a loan from myself. So I'm just paying myself back. And yes, the interest rates stink right now, but I rather know that I'm just replacing my money. I'm just replacing that back, and then it'll be working for myself again in the future. So this slide says it's a great option if you have the self-directed IRA with enough cash for the entire project, or just like, you know, with anything that has equity, you can just get a loan for it. Does that make sense? Has anybody done that IRA poll before?
I
done a
pulled from.
four-
Oh, go ahead. Sorry, go ahead.
I was just gonna say I pulled for my 401k in the past, which I think is very similar. So.
Yeah.
Yeah, same here.
Yeah, it's, you know, you're paying yourself, you're building wealth. It's your own money. I love being the bank. So I've done hard money loans for other people through my self-directed IRA or some of my other brokerage accounts, where if my interest rate right now is, my interest rate at the time was like 5%. And I charged this particular person 7.5%. And it was very much in alignment with if they wanted to go get a loan from the bank, I was just charging what the bank was charging. And number one, I was able to make the extra cash flow from the interest rate. And they were able to pay me back because they just needed the hard money for their project that sold in 3 months. So it was definitely a win-win for everybody. And there, you know, if you're planning on doing something like that, definitely talk to your attorney, get the right documents in place. But that is definitely an opportunity to fund a deal in the future.
Hey, Rebecca, can I ask you a quick question about borrowing like that?
Mhm.
So the way, and I'm sorry, I'm in the car. Google put my camera in timeout while I'm in the car. But so the way I understand borrowing from IRA or 401, pulling the money out, they're charging you an interest rate, but you're actually paying that interest back to yourself. And I guess the risk is if the market jumps way up, you miss that increase in the market. It's true if the market tanks, then you've taken money out of the market. And when you pay yourself back, your rate, you know, you're basically borrowing your own bank, and the only gamble there. I was talking to a client moving from Tennessee, and they were nervous borrowing $50,000 for the down payment, making it non-contingent here. But I kind of explained it that way, and that's how I understand it. Is that how you understand it?
That is how I understand it, yes. And really the only negative, which I mean, right now I feel like we're dodging a bullet because the stock market every day is up and down and it's like so volatile. Yet with homes, I have to be careful because I say investing. Investing could be anything, right? So with home investing, I feel like I can kind of control the scenario if I'm investing in my own backyard. Like I know,
Yeah, you know what stocks you're gambling on. It's just a house, right? You know what the value of
that's
that
right.
house is. So
That's right. And so for me personally, I'm looking at, okay, well, if my Vanguard account was going to hit 13% increase the next 3 months, then dang, I missed out on that. But really, I think putting equity or building equity in a property, as long as it's not land, like if you're building equity in a property, you're probably going to beat out the stock account anyways. Now, my friends who are great stock investors are probably going to murder me for saying that, but okay, so another possible source is friends, family, partners. They could be great options, but oftentimes splits on profits for the partners are often higher than loan interest, and multiple partners often adds complexity. And so, I've been in partnerships with deals, and I found that I was doing more of the work and there were assumptions made, and I had feelings around how much work they didn't do and how much money I should have made versus that. And so when I'm partnering with people on deals, we put together a very clear agreement of what expectations look like and what the overall splits are going to look like. And just know, I don't think every partnership needs to be 50-50. Like, oftentimes we find if we're like, as a real estate agent, we're finding the deals and there's incredible value to that. Like, if my client wants to partner with me on a deal, sometimes I'm not even fronting the money. They are doing that. And my split comes from my grunt work and my project management. And so every deal may look a little different. And oftentimes when I'm looking to partner with people on a deal, I'm literally asking for 50% with putting no money down. And that might make people feel a certain way, but 50% of the work is going to be the negotiations, the finding the vendors, putting the vendors together, and then selling the property at the end. And if my client can make all of their money back and pay 50%, I mean, there's some value to that, especially if they're silent investor. Most of the time we're working with silent investors. Loans definitely cost more than cash, but they're often the best combination of speed, leverage, and convenience. And so if you can work with a conventional lender, awesome. I love, especially when we're doing flips, I love to work with hard money lenders because I'm usually not touching a project that's going to last more than 3 months. So if we're working with a hard money lender, they are collecting 3 months at closing of interest. And so I'm basically floating. I'm not paying anything else out. And we end up winning usually when that happens. Any questions around that?
Yeah, I think I got the gist of hard money lender. Can you just briefly describe that for those that aren't in real estate?
Yeah, actually, so we are going to talk really deep about the different kind of loans. So
Okay.
if we don't answer that question, please ask it again, but I'm pretty sure we're going to answer that question for you.
Sure.
Okay.
Mhm.
And thank you for reminding me that not everybody speaks this lingo every day. So if that happens again, or if I say something jargon wise that is not clear, just stop me. So possible loan sources, traditional banks are possible, but you need a track record of success. So I actually just came across this with some investor clients of mine. They've never done a flip before. They've definitely invested, they have the cash, but they've never flipped anything before. And so I had to actually step in and be a guarantor for them because they just needed some projects under their belt. And so traditional banks are looking for a track record of success with similar projects, good credit, and at least 25% of the project costs in cash. Oftentimes people don't have that. And so, with the appraisals and the underwriting, oftentimes we're finding where an appraiser who is trying to find a rehab project, there's just not a lot to choose from, because most of the time what's on the market is just like this beautiful property at a different price point, right? And so most of the time traditional banks are not touching rehabs. But if you're trying to do a buy and hold, which is where you're putting a long-term renter into the property, traditional banks love those. And I love working with traditional banks for that purpose, because I know I'm putting down a significant amount of money. So my equity should always be where the market is. So does that make sense? I don't think that made sense. If you're only putting 5% down, or if you're buying something for 100% loan to value, then when you go to sell it, you haven't paid enough down. And so you may not have enough equity in the property. If you're putting 20 to 25%, maybe even more down, then yes, you're paying up front, but you don't have to worry about the bank coming and taking your property from you, because there's always going to be equity if you had to emergency sell. Does that make sense?
Yes.
I was reading, what book is it? I love books, guys. There's a book that the Bigger Pockets guys put out, and it's so good. And I'm going to have to think about this for a second. But the premise of the book basically is, in the downturn, people were losing their shirts because they were not required to put any money down, or they put very little down. And all of a sudden they had to repo the house, or they had to foreclose on the house, because there just was no equity in these properties and they weren't able to cash flow. So traditional banks just are really, really careful not to loan or overextend themselves, I think is the right way to say that. But that traditional banks are definitely still a possibility. I've purchased many properties traditionally. Also something to think about, Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac only allow up to 10 properties. So if you start leveraging yourself with a conventional loan or any loan product like that, you have a cap of how many you can do. And so when you start getting to that amount, you may have to find a commercial lender and package some of those loans together. And I can think of like UARI, for example, can do that. Community First Bank, mostly the credit unions are willing to do a blanket or a package loan. So private or hard money loans, they are private individuals or specialized companies that lend to investors for fix and flip or rental deals. Go back to the cap rate rule. I don't love private money or hard money for rentals because you're always going to be chasing that cash flow. And it's really hard with an 11% interest rate to win with cash flow. So fix and flips, I love for private and hard money. Love, love, love. We are about to close on May 28th with a hard money loan. And I love them because it's super simple. They, it's like they do this all the time and they ask what they need and we're in and out. It's great. So the specific to hard money, they're based solely on the quality of the deal. Your credit may be checked, but if you have a good deal and even a little cash, you can always get the funding. So, and then Elizabeth, this is your world with wholesale. But if you don't have any cash to invest, then figure out how to get a partner or wholesale the deal. Oftentimes, if you're a real estate agent, you think in commissions. I don't want to say you. I used to think in only commissions, whereas wholesalers think in assignment fees or marketing fees. And they're able to say, okay, for a minimum, like if I'm working with an investor and it's a for sale by owner or the seller's not offering a commission, we 100% upfront negotiate that my fee to work with me is a minimum $5,000. And I mean, I don't say minimum $5,000 to them. I tell them what my fee is, and it's either a yes or a no, and we move on. But for me personally, I will not get our company involved. I will not negotiate. I will not do the deal for less than $5,000. And so that's where that wholesale thought comes into play. And then you'll have enough money to meet the requirements of whatever product you're going to borrow from. You have questions about that?
So Rebecca, I see on these investor sites a lot that's assignable. Are you right? Is that what you're talking about? Or am I completely in left field? Is that something different where you go under contract and the contract is assignable and
Yep.
somebody flips it over? Is that what you're saying? I'm under contract for 200,000, but I can assign this to anybody I want. Somebody's willing to pay 240.
Yes.
I make the spread on that difference. Is that right?
That's exactly it. Yes. And, wholesalers win. Like, in my opinion, yes, there's some not so great wholesalers. There's some unethical people out there for sure. However, wholesalers know that there's a scenario in which a seller has to sell and they're willing to sell for X price. But if they are looking at the deal correctly, they know that there's room and that a ready, willing, and able buyer is willing to pay X amount. As long as this seller over here gets what they get, then in my opinion, they've earned the $40,000, which isn't really $40,000 because you have title, you have attorney fees, you have, some of the marketing fees, et cetera, et cetera. But really, let's call it $30,000 in real estate terms, in, traditional terms, that's a commission, but really it's a fee. It's an assigned fee.
So what are you seeing on like the closing period? Is that a 30-day close? Is that a 60? It all depends on the seller. And
It-
then I guess, go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah, it depends on the seller, and so in a wholesale scenario, because our company is able to switch gears with that depending on the scenario. We partner with a company who can pull title fast. So I'm going to shout out Harry Marsh Law, 24-hour title. They literally can turn around a title. I mean, I think they could probably close something in 3 to 5 days. They just have the infrastructure to be able to do so, and they work in that world so often. And so if you have a seller and a product that you're assigning to somebody else and you need a quick sale, then you just go to the title company that can close it fastest.
Okay. And I guess if you can't flip it, you can buy it because you know you're getting a deal, right? Or if you
Yeah.
get a bad feeling, you just walk away for your due diligence money, I guess.
That's it. Yeah. So that's where the bad raps come in, is that, people lock something up and then, they promised the seller that they'll close in 30 days and then they're not getting any hits, or they're not marketing it to the right people. And it just sits and sits, and then you have to terminate. And that poor seller thought they had a cash buyer,
Right. And a
Yeah.
lot of
So-
times they're in a situation that they need to sell. We're looking at a foreclosure. We're looking at those that are about going to auction. They're in a motivated situation many times.
For sure. Yeah. And Elizabeth, I think, you're a great person to talk about wholesale, because you were working on land deals, and your primary, what you were looking at were people who were in distress, right?
Yeah, more for the house, but then land also those maybe that have had inherited it and didn't have a use for it.
Right.
That kind of thing.
Right. So you just have to be careful. But a lot of, like, we had a great acquisitions partner in 2020, like before COVID. He just had come on board, and we were able to get some assigned deals wrapped up in 2 days. Like, he met with the seller, got it locked up, and then all of a sudden had 3 buyers ready to go. And, we just closed it, I think, 10 days later. And there's contracts that need to be involved. You have to be really, really careful with as is, and the expectations of the future buyer, of course. So something else, I don't want to get down the rabbit hole of wholesale, but something else to consider with wholesale is North and South Carolina, they don't allow a double close. So it's really challenging to, it's hard to close with the future buyer's money. So if you're trying to close on this deal here, and then your future buyer is simultaneously trying to close on that same house, again, you have to work with an attorney who knows what they're doing, because you can't do a double close in our states. So like in Arizona, for example, seller, you're the wholesaler, and then buyer here. You could just take the buyer money and close. This wholesaler, it is nothing to do with one another. But that's because of the way that the closings can be done in that particular state. So just be cautious if you're trying to get involved with the wholesale. Okay, so these are typical hard money loan terms. commercial uses, non-owner occupied, owner real estate. Say that 15 times fast. Non-owner occupied, owner real estate held for investment. Okay. So typical hard money loan terms are for that, for commercial use. Maybe you're flipping it. Maybe it is an actual commercial building. Maybe it's a multifamily, etc. So we're not talking about like a true conventional product for a single family residential. So you become, or they, the hard money lender, is the first trust deed. So they have the collateral, and the note in the terms, like the mortgage, looks very similar to the bank loan. It's like almost exactly mirrored to a traditional bank loan. They like to see 65 to 70 LTV, which is loan to value. And then they have the construction holdback, which allows you to draw for fund renovations or to fund renovations. Something really important to remember is sometimes the attorney is going to charge for those fund or those draws. Because if you're working with a hard money lender, they are asked to pull title multiple times to make sure there's no cloud. So no mechanic lien, no, the contractor gets mad and starts putting liens on the property. They have to look at title every time you ask for a draw. And so there may be some additional fees associated to that. So when you're talking to a hard money lender, make sure that that's all mapped out. And again, winning to me with a hard money lender is if they are collecting 3 months up front of my interest, because most hard money loans are interest only payments. You're not also paying principal, something to consider. But if I'm getting that pulled back for 3 months, I'm not paying, I don't have a payment through that process. I've paid everything at closing, and then ideally you sell before the 3 months are up. Now, if it's a bigger project, then maybe you can negotiate that, but just know there's some opportunities to negotiate your terms. Any questions on that? No. The credit of the borrower, again, the credit of the borrower is not as important as the viability of the deal. So if I'm purchasing a property in my LLC, which is what I recommend when you're doing any sort of flip or project like this, they are looking at me as an investor, me as a good, I'm trying to think of other words other than sport terms, but like they're looking for slam dunks. They're looking for someone who doesn't have feelings. They have stats and truth to what the deal looks like. So if you are able to prove to the hard money lender or to the private money lender that here's the deal, here's what my plan is, here's what the ARV is looking like, so much of the other stuff that traditional banks ask for just goes away. What Lou mentioned about points and interest, points, especially if you don't have many deals under your belt, they charge significant point charges, significant. And so for those who are not familiar with what points are typically 1% of your the amount that you're borrowing. And so 1 point equals 1%, most of the time. So be careful when you're calculating what the actual expense is going to be. 9 to 13% interest with 2 to 5 points is very common, depending on what the loan to value is and what your experience is. So typically I don't get charged points because I have so much experience. But my interest rate was like 9.5, 10%, and there's just no getting around that, especially since money's not cheap anymore. And then the cost of the loan is directly related to the risk. We've had a project where my clients were converting a 5-bedroom efficiency house. So somebody came in and turned all 5 of those bedrooms into efficiency apartments and collected rent from each apartment separately. Never rezoned it, never really changed anything about the property on the exterior. And so when we acquired the property, the appraiser's like, I don't know what to do with this. Like, there's no comp. This isn't a multifamily because it's not zoned to be. And so we had a little bit of a challenge trying to fight that, and we couldn't get the deal. We couldn't get it into a commercial opportunity. It all got figured out, but that was definitely one of the roadblocks, was because of the risk. Some other considerations is, with a properly structured loan, the return on your cash is much higher because you don't need as much, and you won't often need another partner or investor, which, keeps more profit in your pocket. And if you do need to bring in a partner with cash or credit or anything like that, then it's easier to find a partner for the lower amount. So, like, if you're trying to find someone with $50,000 for construction or $50,000 for your down payment, then do that and then get the hard money. And that's, again, where you potentially have a silent investor. And maybe that partner only gets their money back plus interest versus 50% of your profits. Every structure is not equal. Kyle, did we answer?
Oh, yes, you did.
Okay, awesome. I wanted to make sure that you got what you needed out of that conversation.
Thank you.
You're welcome. So this went a lot faster than it would have in person. So thank you for bearing with me on that. I think some other things that I wanted to share with you guys, not only is the creative way to find money, which is, find a partner, talk to a hard money lender. Simply Funded is actually owned by the Grid. They're in the Grid umbrella. I went ahead and I'm working with them on one of our new flips, and I've loved them. They have been great to work with, and they're called Simply Funded. And another great company is I Fund Cities. Eric spoke to our group last year, maybe it was 2 years ago now. And Eric is wonderful to work with. They are private money versus hard money. And then I've worked with Upright previously as well. And they do require you to have experience under your belt. They will not accept you as a potential client if you don't have experience. So it goes back to, if you don't have experience and you want to start in this field, then start partnering with people that do have experience, whether it's, investing $10,000 on a deal that they're already working with, or you know, be an equity owner where you source the deal, you find the deal and say, hey, I want 5 to 10% because I'm going to be doing this for you. Just structure the deal the right way. And then, of course, wholesaling. You don't ever have to use your own money. Literally, wholesaling is one of those great gifts. All right, Lou.
Yes, Rebecca. Who is what's that company called? Who you work with, Eric? What was that company called again?
ifundcities.com. So it's like literally and then FUNDCITIES.com.
Perfect. Thank you.
You're welcome. And I am happy to make any connection to Eric or to Cherie or to Kyle. You know, we have vetted folks. There's also lots of people in our grid world. So we've had other lenders come and be part of this conversation, and they're great resources as well. Some of them have construction of perm products. They have investor focused products as well. Like, they're not necessarily a traditional bank, but they are a traditional loan officer, and they can pull from different products that their company offers. So we can make those connections as well.
Awesome. Thank you.
You're welcome. Something else I love. So Mortgage Right, my friend Ray Patterson runs that group, and he has a product right now that allows, very similar to Ribbon, very similar to the Ribbon product that so many of us real estate agents know, where if you are looking to buy another property, whether it's primary or not, but if you are looking to take some equity out of your home and buy another property, they are able to do a bridge loan now. And I love bridge loans. But again, if your plan is to sell your primary residence, don't pull from it. Don't pull the equity out, because who knows what the market's going to look like in a year, 2, 3 years. But if you find and source a great deal and you know that you have a significant amount of equity, then that could be an option where you're pulling out from your primary to buy your investment. And I love that idea. We've connected a couple of our clients to Ray previously about that. Does anyone else have any questions related to how to find money?
Not how to find money. I have another question if anybody has questions about money. But
Yeah, Jeff, go ahead.
so back to your original point, Rebecca, I just want to make sure I grasp this concept. So if I have $1 million piece of property and it produces $70,000 of income, I'm assuming that's got to be net income to have a 7% cap rate. Is that right? Is that after you pay your taxes and insurance and
Yeah.
that property net 70,000 minus any financing charges, right?
Yes. And where people fail is that they haven't also included that.
Okay.
So that cap rate actually is lower if you didn't include your financing.
Okay. So if I'm looking at a piece of property, it's $1 million, and I add up all the overhead that it takes to run that property, maintenance, painting, roofs, that, all the overhead that goes into it, and I net 70,000, then my cap rate is 7%, correct?
Yes. Accurate.
And that's assuming no loan whatsoever. Now, if I can get a mortgage at 6%, you're saying do that all day long. If it's 9%, you don't move forward. Is that kind of what you're saying as far as the interest goes?
That's my opinion, because you're chasing, unless you know that interest rate is going to come down or you can pay, you can change your expenses in the future. You're going to be chasing the cash flow the whole time.
Right. Right. So as
Now-
long as it produces $1 a month or $1 a year, then you've got your tax deductions for depreciation. You got there's all kinds of advantages. Hopefully the property appreciates, and then somebody else essentially is paying off $1 million asset for you.
Right. Exactly. And we have lots
But
of
if you're-
clients that we serve that don't care about cap rate. They don't care about cash flow, which to me is silly, but
Okay.
they don't necessarily care about those things. They do expect appreciation. But in my opinion, appreciation is a hope and a prayer.
Yeah.
And who knows what the future brings, but traditionally, at least in our market in Charlotte, we're looking at least 4% average appreciation year over year. But the stock market is looking at 13% right now.
Yeah.
And so, that's where it's like, okay, I don't have a crystal ball, but I'd rather cash flow with a great investment property than have my money in a stock account that may or may not win.
Yeah. And who's going to lend you $600,000 or $700,000 to put that money in the stock market? Because there's nothing to back up the loan. At least you have a piece of property that can be called in. You know what I mean? So
Exactly.
I just think there's a lot. I mean, we're biased, obviously, but there's a lot of advantages to real estate that people don't get. So as long as you're cash flowing something, and then even if you don't get appreciation and the rates don't get any better, you're still, someone else is putting money into a retirement account essentially for you. So
Exactly. Yep. That's exactly
Okay.
right.
all right, that kind of crystallizes it, because you see people that look at deals and they can tell you in 10 seconds if they want it or not. And they're
they
just
can't have an
running
ego.
a calculator. They
Yeah.
can't have what? Sorry.
They can't have an ego around it. Like most of the time when
Right.
people are like, I won't touch that, it's because they don't have an emotional tie to it whatsoever.
Right. Okay. That is super helpful. Thank you. I thought I kind of knew it, but that really crystallizes it for me. So thank you.
You're so welcome. You're welcome. Any other questions? Nope. Okay. Well, I am grateful you all switched gears. I'm sure I'm going to get a few phone calls tomorrow of people that were coming to the office, but I'm glad you all were here and safe and not in the hail. And next month, so don't kick me, but next month we actually moved up the meeting 1 week earlier because I will be on vacation. And I wanted also, we're going to have a special guest so it's the first Wednesday versus the second Wednesday of the month, which is June 5th. So again, sorry if you guys already have plans because you have grid on the second Wednesday, but June 5th, we are planning to have a conversation. I think it's around building your dream team, and it'll be great. We're going to have a special guest. So thank you all for being here.